Hi everybody, thank you so much if you have returned. I'm so glad. If you're new, thank you so much for choosing my video. So this is a lesson for year 9 on the Industrial Revolution, following on from diseases and housing, etc. In the 1800s. So this is the AQA sort of version, EdXL version. I know OCR, it's all very similar, so hopefully this is helpful to all of you, despite no matter what kind of exam board they will go on to do. My school does EdXL. So this is the do now. So they started to do top trumps, which half of them don't actually know what those are, which makes me feel ancient at 25, but there we go. So they started off these top trumps of housing, food, and sort of waste and water, which is just a fun way for them to actually, consolidate their learning from those lessons. So if they've done this, they can write a summary on how living in lodging houses would have impacted people's health. Obviously this is very specific, and here we've got some imagery sort of a lodging house. So moving on. Now this is the opportunity for you to choose whether or not you want to include cholera in your lesson. You don't have to. I have done this because I have a particularly tricky group with this year 9 class that I see most of the time, in terms of their behaviour, is so that I don't think they are listening fully. So my aim is to make sure that they're not listening for a plethora of reasons. It's a bit complex, I don't want to go into it too much now. But I've included cholera just so that they do definitely understand that disease is rife at this time. And then they will go on to do children in the mills. And then after that is an assessment. So their learning objectives. They are to identify the conditions children worked in, to examine how serious cholera was, and to analyse the changes that took place because of the Industrial Revolution in England. So we've looked at housing, diseases, water and waste. So what was cholera? So we've already analysed these diseases. They did some tables with diseases. We went over all the symptoms, etc. So cholera, though, is probably our biggest killer at this time. So how did cholera get to England? So the third cholera pandemic was the third major outbreak of cholera, obviously, originating in India. So this would have been brought over by various sources such as merchants and travellers. So since having COVID-19, obviously they can now relate to what a pandemic is far more. So this hopefully should give them some more insight. So the epidemic in London was claimed over 10,000 people's lives and 23,000 in Great Britain. It had some of the highest fatalities of the 1800s epidemics. But thankfully in 1854, John Snow, a physician, figured out the main cause was dirty drinking water, and eventually the government got involved and the epidemic came to an end. So is the government getting involved surprising? Now, I've put this on because previously in our last lesson, one of our key words was laissez-faire. So obviously laissez-faire, leave alone. The government do not get involved in ordinary people, their sort of, not politics, that's the wrong word, their everyday affairs, how they live their lives. So obviously this is the aim, is that they can recall that key word, and they might need some prompting, but you can also link how Jon Snow, obviously they go into depth on Jon Snow and cholera in year 10, so this is a nice segue into that. So little bit of a task. So I've made up somebody. I love this picture. I've just cropped it and removed the background. So this lady is this lady as well. Obviously she's contracted disease, and then I've also just got this illustration here. So this is just a gap fill. So this is Mary Ann Bethlehem. She's 18 years old and lives in London. She's been drinking from the blank in the courtyard. She lives in a family of 8 in a blank. This was a room shared with lots of other people. Mary Ann begins to feel unwell. Her sister Jane recently had symptoms of body lice and itching. This meant she died of blank. Mary Ann begins to blank. Her bowel movements are also very unusual. Unfortunately, Mary Ann's skin begins to turn blank. She eventually dies from blank in 1854. Obviously, she's been drinking from the water pump in the courtyard. They live in a lodging house. Her sister has died of typhus, which they can use their previous tables from this. She begins to vomit. Her bowel movements are unusual. Her skin begins to turn blue, obviously, and she eventually dies from cholera. So this should be fairly straightforward. It just gives them the chance to sort of have a bit of a story and make sure they understand, obviously, how cholera is being contracted at this time. So why are conditions so bad? Now, this is sort of our segue into the Industrial Revolution, going on from disease. So cholera and other diseases were impacting everyone, but mostly our poorer communities in slums in busy cities. We already know that the Industrial Revolution was happening from 1750 until 1900, so this meant trades were being changed by machinery. So farming and agriculture, cloth and textile factories, coal mines, steam power, all these things. And again, we've got the BBC bite-sized illustrations, which I love. If you've seen my other videos, you already know that. And I've got this little pen icon here to make sure that they, understand that these are the reasons and that they can write these down. Because we want to make sure they have consolidated their learning on the Industrial Revolution. So their task: in pairs, using the sheets, create a fact file that details the main points on transport technology and this case study. So they've got 10 minutes. So in pairs, this should be a lot faster. You can always extend this. This is attached to the PowerPoint. I've just hidden the slides and screenshot them. So you'd print these off. You can print them off in A3 if you want. But here we've just got about the steam engine and about the coal mines. Here we've got Richard Arkwright and talking about James Hargreave inventing the spinning jenny, and then Arkwright opens a factory in Derbyshire, and it just talks on and on about how they revolutionised factory life. And then transport is their last one, so huge changes, the roads, talking about canals, and so on. So this is just a chance for them to have a little look at how the Industrial Revolution is sort of changing our lives. So after this, our key focus, though, is factory workers. So obviously we can lead on from what we've just looked at. So factory workers, who are these people that actually work in our industrial revolutionised factories? So in the 1800s, it became common to employ women and children to work in factories. They want to know this and make sure they have this point down. Before the Industrial Revolution, all but the wealthiest women worked, and I've made that big so they don't misread and see that wealthiest women worked. They didn't. So this work's normally done at home or in the fields and took place alongside the rest of the family. So as factories spread across the Midlands, North West and Scottish Lowlands, job opportunities are offered to women, particularly in textile factories. So they earn high wages and it gives them independence. So these are the good parts about working in the factories. But it's hard because obviously they will have young children, so they either have to leave them in the care of other female relatives or they take them to work, as we see. So why might you employ a child in a factory? So this is the chance for them to, reflect and kind of use their partner as a sounding board about, think, pair, share. What do you think? So children are cheap to employ. And their small hands were able to effectively operate the machinery. Unfortunately, the conditions in the factories were very dangerous. For example, now, this needs an animation, so this would come up after they've had a think, pair, share, which I should add. So, the days were long. Children worked 12 to 14-hour shifts 6 days a week. We also have a second point of there was very little safety equipment, so they're seriously injured or they're killed by machinery. Their pay is low, they earn 36p a week, and children are tired and start to work slowly, so their masters are very strict and they beat them, or they had their ears nailed to pieces of wood, so on and so on. So we've kind of got this horrific picture of effectively slave labour. So this is kind of giving, and also your students should be able to relate to this a lot more because obviously your students are young, so they should hopefully feel, empathy here. So we've got a clip from one of my favourite films, which is Oliver, but it's the 1968 version, and this is just the glorious food scene, where they're singing in the workhouse, and this gives people, again, a chance to have that visual learning. So most cities have workhouses, like we just saw in the clip. So the workhouse officials were grateful to the mill and factory owners who took the poor children from the workhouses and made them unpaid apprentices. So if we think back to the case study they looked at earlier on Arkwright, they employed women, but mostly children. So, for example, his spinners earned 16p a week and worked 13-hour days, 6 days a week. So, they have the textbook and they have sources in the textbook, and again we're kind of weaving in sources here, so we're looking at some accounts from the time. What do they tell us about working in factories and mills? So they need to work on their own and summarise each source, and they have 15 minutes, and this is a silence timer, so if they talk, if they don't get on task, you can restart this timer, and this can take as long as it'll take, but they need to make sure they are definitely looking at the textbook and understanding those sources. So this is a chance for them to kind of get a bit of a peek into how things are changing. Their next lesson would be on maps and looking at the actual overarching sort of view of change in England at the time. So this will kind of obviously lend itself to the change and continuity, secondary concept skills within history, and their assessment will be on how far a certain area changed. Now they essentially just want to say that obviously the introduction of cotton mills, of textile mills, etc. revolutionised things. Obviously children are working in mills, this is going to impact, families and the population and so on and so on, and this is why disease is spreading. There's going to be loads of things they can actually say, but obviously this is a lead up into that assessment. So I hope that this gave you some ideas as to what kind of activities you might want to do with your students on this. This can be a bit of a tricky topic, so yes, I hope this helped, and thank you so much for watching. Bye.